Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the Heritage Foundation. As Director of Lectures and Seminars, it's my privilege to welcome everyone to our Lewis Lehrman Auditorium, to welcome those who are joining us on our heritage.org website as well. We would ask everyone in-house to make that last courtesy check that cell phones have been turned off, especially for those recording our events today. We will, of course, post the program within 24 hours on our homepage for everyone's future reference. And our internet viewers are welcome to send questions or comments at any time, simply emailing us at speaker@heritage.org, speaker@heritage.org. Hosting our discussion this afternoon is Edwin Meese. Mr. Meese serves as our Ronald Reagan Distinguished Fellow in Public Policy and Chairman of our Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. And of course, he served Ronald Reagan as the 75th Attorney General of the United States. Please join me in welcoming Ed Meese. Mr. Meese.
Thank you, John, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have been over the last week celebrating, or commemorating is a better term, the events of the 11th of September 2001. It was the first attack on a city, or cities actually, in the mainland of the United States since the War of 1812. It was perhaps one of the most traumatic events in the lives of many of the people that are here. To me, it ranks with an event that I was witnessing as a younger person, Pearl Harbor. But it caused tremendous burdens to fall on our law enforcement agencies, on our first responders of the fire services, and so on. It was obviously a tragic event for so many families in this country, and I think that every citizen felt this personally in one way or another, if nothing more than observing what went on television for those fateful hours. But it also had a tremendous impact on our legal system and on our judicial system. And that is something that is still going on today, as many of the issues that began on the 11th of September, 9/11, continue today to be litigated in the courts and to have a good deal of legal scholarship. And one of the very important contributions to the legal scholarship on this subject is the book that we are talking about today, Confronting Terror, 9/11 and the Future of American National Security, which has essays by leading voices in law and policy. It was edited by Dean Reuter and John Yoo, one of our speakers today. And we have in our audience both Dean Reuter and also Paul Rosenzweig, who is one of the contributors to the book. Would they stand and let's commemorate them being here? Paul's in the back. Our first speaker today will be, and our speakers will speak very briefly because we want to open this up to discussion among them as well as to the audience as rapidly as possible. But our first speaker is John Yoo. John is a professor of law at the University of California at Berkeley, at the School of Law there, known as Boalt Hall. He has received his own education, his bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, in American history from Harvard University. He served a period of time between college and law school as a newspaper reporter here in Washington, D.C. He then went on to Yale Law School, where he received his J.D., where he was articles editor of the Yale Law Journal. He has served in all three branches of the federal government. He was a clerk for Judge Lawrence Silberman of the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. He was also a clerk subsequently for Justice Clarence Thomas on the United States Supreme Court. In the legislative field, he was a general counsel of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as an executive branch member, he served as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel at the United States Department of Justice. And his issues there where he worked were primarily involving foreign affairs, national security, and separation of powers, but particularly where he was a very key member of the Office of Legal Counsel in dealing with the issues related to national security and particularly the attack on 9/11. Professor Yu has been a visiting professor at several law schools and has received numerous fellowships and awards and honors during his career. He is a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and has received the Paul Bader Award for Excellence in Legal Scholarship and Teaching from the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy. He's also testified before the Judiciary Committees of both the Senate and the House and has advised the state of California on constitutional issues. He's the author of 3 books, The Powers of War and Peace, subtitled The Constitution and Foreign Affairs After 9/11, War by Other Means, An Insider's Account of War on Terror, and Crisis and Command, The History of Executive Power from George Washington to George W. Bush. Please join me in welcoming Professor Yu.
Thank you.
Shame on you, Mr. Yu. What are you doing here? Shame on Heritage Foundation. You don't deserve to be here. You are wrong. 10 years later, America is less safe. Our democracy undermined, our civil liberties. How dare you even be here in public? Get out of here, and shame on you, Heritage Foundation.
I defend your right to free speech, John.
I was just going to say that the speaker just speaking does not represent the Heritage Society.
I'd like to thank Ed, who's a graduate of Berkeley Law School, for making me feel at home. By maybe bring back some of his own memories of his time at Berkeley as well. But I would like to thank General Meese and Todd Gaziano for inviting me to speak and for arranging this panel. And I'd really like to thank Nadine Strossen, who is a contributor in the book, also to having this debate here. And we also just had one last week at her institution at New York Law School. I couldn't think of a better way to think back on the last 10 years and, as General Meese said, commemorate what we've all been through and to look towards the future of national security policy. I just want to be very brief because, as General Meese said, I look forward to hearing what Nadine's going to say and turning it over to questions and answers. But I basically look back at the last 10 years and draw 3 lessons. One, the most important lesson is that the most important thing to happen in the United States in the last 10 years was nothing. The last 10 years never saw another successful terrorist attack in the United States. And I think the most important question to ask is why and whether it was worth it. To me, the most important decision was one that President Bush made as Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive under the Constitution on the very night of 9/11, which was to treat the 9/11 attacks as an act of war. I think the way we thought about it in the Justice Department at that time was that if any country had attacked us in the same way on September 11th as Al-Qaeda did, no one would have had any doubt that we were at war. The only difference was that Al-Qaeda was not a nation state. And the important legal and constitutional issue was, could we be at war with a non-nation state? And I think President Bush made that decision for the country that night. And that was an important decision because once you make that call, then the United States can turn to the laws and rules of warfare to deal with Al-Qaeda and the threat of terrorism. All of those, I think, were in display not just in our invasion of Afghanistan, the use of troops and drones to wipe out much of Al-Qaeda's existing leadership at the time of 9/11, but also was put fully on display, I think, in the successful operation to kill Osama bin Laden over the summer, which I think of as President Obama's greatest foreign policy and national security achievement in the last 2.5 years. There you saw intelligence provided by people who'd been detained under the laws of war, electronic surveillance producing more intelligence, all pulled together to locate where Osama bin Laden had been hiding, and then the use of military force to go out and kill him. Right? Under the rules of the criminal justice system, which administrations of both political parties had used in their approach to terrorism before 9/11, we would have instead indicted Osama bin Laden and sent out people to try to arrest him after he had committed a crime. the switch to the approach of war made our policy forward-looking to try to stop